Dark Souls has been widely regarded as one of the best video games of all time, and at the very least, it's become so iconic in the gaming scene that it spawned a whole genre named after itself. But what makes the entire Souls series so unique, and how did it become such a big part of my life? First, let's back up a bit. I grew up watching content creators all throughout middle school, high school, and college. In the early 2010s, horror games were trending, and there was something oddly entertaining about seeing these people struggle trying to find pages while avoiding this faceless figure, or giving names and personalities to inanimate objects to cope with the creepy atmosphere of this unsettling castle.
Oh no, Mr. Chef! Stefano! Alas, pede!
But among all of these people, one in particular caught my attention.
I don't know if you even like me. I don't know if you even like...
Cryaotic, also known as Cry. I know there has been some controversy earlier this year, but I don't feel like it's my place to comment on it, nor is that the point of bringing him up. The point is, a friend of mine recommended me some of his playthroughs, and they captivated me for one main reason: how emotionally invested in the characters he would get. As the best examples of this, specifically 3 playthroughs come to mind. Telltale's The Walking Dead.
Everything will be okay!
Lee?
Don't you fucking do that! You... Let go of her!
Let go of her, you son of a bitch!
Naughty Dog's The Last of Us.
Fuck! Yep, that's a thing! Come on! Shit! Hey!
And Dontnod's Life is Strange.
The actions will have consequences because I watered my plant? How can you make me choose this? How can you give me this...
If you've played any of these, I think you'll agree with me when I say they are life-changing experiences. And by that, I mean that they changed my outlook on video games. Sure, I've been playing them ever since I was a kid, like Pokemon or Super Mario Bros. When these were a thing, and they will always give me this insane feeling of nostalgia. However, I now believe that some video games are so much more than just games that they should unironically be considered art. And this is obviously very debatable. I'm no expert, nor am I trying to sound pretentious, but video games have evolved from a simple overcoming the objective paradigm to criminally beautiful masterpieces. And this sense of beauty is one of the reasons why Dark Souls became so important to me, but we'll get to that in a second. During my freshman year of college, Cryaotic had been posting less frequently on his YouTube channel, but he still had plenty of playthroughs that I hadn't watched but planned to, so I started slowly chipping away at those. Eventually though, only a few remained. The ones that didn't pique my interest, and the ones like this. Now, back then I was used to maybe 40-minute long video stops, so this was a whole new challenge. We're talking roughly 70 hours of content. Nonetheless, I decided to finally tackle this head-on. Needless to say, this is probably where I started watching things at 1.25, 1.5, but in the end, I did watch it all, and Xenoblade Chronicles is now one of my favorite JRPGs, with its amazing soundtrack, plot twists, and what is probably the best voice line delivery I've heard in any video game.
I'm killing you!
But absurd, how does this connect to Dark Souls? We're actually getting close. After watching Xenoblade Chronicles, I no longer felt intimidated by longer content, since it all seemed fairly short in comparison, so I moved on to Cry's other recordings of his streams until I stumbled upon the spark that would kindle a fire that I didn't even know existed. Bloodborne. My first real contact with the Soulsborne series. Because my first contact with it was actually during a podcast, and back then I knew nothing about Souls games, so my first impression was literally, what even is this game? They're just going through the same long corridor over and over again. I don't get this. But I would get it eventually. Anyway, I watched Cry play Bloodborne in its entirety, and it completely captivated me. The leveling system and how punishing it was, the ambience of Yharnam, the enemy design, and the thrilling boss battle music. I won at that, firsthand. I wouldn't play Bloodborne because I had just seen it, but I was ready to dive into the world of Dark Souls. Soon after, I had a conversation with a friend who suggested I start with Dark Souls 2. And so I did.
Without really knowing why.
And to this day, I still believe I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as I did if it wasn't my first Souls game. I think the vast majority, if not all the people who've played these games, can agree that the first experience with the series is always going to be cherished in particular, which is probably why DS2 has become such a niche game. because it is definitely the one that deviates the most from the other Souls games, and I can only assume that most players came to DS2 expecting a second Dark Souls, but that was just not the case. Anyway, I understand that FromSoft games might not be for everyone. In fact, I gave up on DS2 when I reached Fume Knight. At first anyway. Back then I truly believed I had had my fun and that I was done with the game. Little did I know, I would later find it to be one of my favorite fights. Okay, we've covered how I got into Dark Souls and I could talk about it for hours, but I still want to make one final connection between that and how I got to where I am today. I found out Cryaotic had been streaming on Twitch since he'd been silent on YouTube for a while, so I decided to check it out. At the time he was streaming Nier and Mario Odyssey, and I was mesmerized by the interaction factor of real-time live streaming. Meanwhile, I had been playing the rest of the Souls games, cause I couldn't get enough of the series, and if I'm being honest, I don't know exactly how I found the no-hit community, but I assume it's cause I was looking for Dark Souls streamers. Regardless, I stumbled upon this legend,
Lose weight, bitch!
and I quickly understood the hype behind what he was trying to achieve. For someone who had just recently beaten these games after struggling through countless mobs and boss fights, seeing this man legitimately claiming he would not take a single hit while attempting to do the same was absolutely intriguing. If there was any kind of skepticism at first, it was soon replaced with amazement when he actually did what he set out to do.
World record! Holy shit!
After watching him for some time though, I realized that only some parts of these games required real practice, as most of the strats used were meant to be safe for consistency. So I thought anyone could do this. And to some extent, it is true, but it requires a ridiculous amount of time and dedication. Anyway, if I was gonna try to no-hit a Souls game, it might as well be DS2, since it was the one I was most familiar with. Incidentally, it was the least popular among the series, and not many runs had been achieved yet, so I had a chance to attempt something new. And so I set out to beat all bosses of Dark Souls 2 base game without taking a hit. I was successful after many failed attempts, and it made me want to do more runs. I tried my hand at hitless Dark Souls 3, and we got close, but no cigar, and I finally realized why. No matter how rewarding it was to finally beat a run, after spending so much time practicing and attempting to get it, that was not what I was looking for. My enjoyment of Souls games came from moments such as finding Majula for the first time and hearing that first note. Blissfully unaware of how much like home this place would feel, knowing that despite how arduous the journey through Drangleic got, there would always be a safe place to come back to, where we could rest a while before setting out again. Or the heartbreak we all felt when we saw a friend lose his sanity after all the moments we shared.
Ah, hello. You don't look hollow, far from it. I am Solaire of Astora, an adherent of the Lord of Sunlight. Now that I am undead, I have come to this great land, the birthplace of Lord Gwyn, to seek my very own son. You really are fond of chatting with me, aren't you? If I didn't know better, I'd think you had feelings for me. Oh no, dear me, pretend you didn't hear that. Why? Why? After all this searching, I still cannot find it. Finally, I have found it. I have. My very own son. I am the son. I've done it. I have. Oh. It's over. My son. It's setting. It's dark. So dark. Jolly cooperation.
Or fighting Cinder and just standing there in denial as the armored figure rose back up, followed by the timeless notes. Only to reveal that the real test was to be able to face all our past experiences with the series in one final battle. So, in conclusion, while hitless runs gave me a new way to enjoy Dark Souls, it could never come even close to what I experienced when I played through the series for the first time. There's still a lot more I didn't say, mostly because the point of this video was to explain my connection with Dark Souls and no-hit runs, but maybe over time we can share more moments over silly video games. With that said, I'll cherish the memories I've made throughout this life-changing journey, and I want to thank everyone who was there for it. But just as the fire fades, so must the cycle end, so it can begin anew.
Farewell, Ashen One. Mayst thou thy peace discover.
Dark Souls is just me.
Whoa! Curses!
but